The stars over Yoker Prime never blinked, no matter how many ships burned in orbit. Ambassador Lynn Marrow stood in silence at the edge of the crystalline platform, watching his fragment of shattered hulls sparkled in the upper atmosphere like falling snow. She did not flinch. She did not blink. Behind her, the charred remains of the diplomatic compound still smoked, the air thick with scorched ozone and ash. Alien bodies lay twisted and broken across the marble steps. Berexi, Elant, a few shell-armored members of the Kthel. Not one of them had managed to draw their weapons before the humans retaliated. Lynn adjusted the hem of her singed blazer, brushed a smear of soot from her cheek, and stepped over a cracked piece of ornamental obsidian. Her eyes remained locked on the horizon, where the fleet of the galactic Concord pulsed like a wound in the sky. They hadn't sent negotiators. They'd sent enforcers. Behind her, Boots crunched glass. "Ma'am," said Major Caldervos, his voice clipped and dry. "Evac team inbound in 6. We hold here." Lynn turned her head slightly, enough to regard him from the corner of her eye. He was bloodied, one shoulder of his armor dented inward from a kinetic blast. His jaw was clenched, his eyes dark hollows under his helmet's retracted visor. But he stood firm. Always did. "How many did we lose?" she asked. He didn't lie. 17. 4 of them civilians. The rest. "Marines," she finished quietly. He nodded. The Concord's assault had not come without warning. There had been murmurs for months. Cracks in the Alliance's carefully plastered facade. Humans had climbed too fast, moved too boldly, and asked too few permissions. The other species, long accustomed to their rigid protocols and century-spanning deliberations, had not expected Earth's rapid rise. Diplomacy, they said. Patience. Humanity had smiled, nodded, and kept building, expanding, innovating, surviving. But survival had a cost. And when humans learned the others weren't negotiating in good faith, they'd begun preparing for war. Quietly, carefully, like apex predators who walk politely into a room full of sheep, only to find sharpened horns waiting behind smiles. Lynn stepped away from the edge and walked slowly toward the burning ruins of the council chamber. "This was never about the weapons," she murmured. "No, ma'am. They knew we could fight. They just didn't think we would." The Major's silence confirmed it. Everyone in the Corps had seen it. The disdain, the sneers, how the elder species had scoffed when humans offered joint defense pacts, how they laughed when Earth deployed security to its trade stations, as if humans, hairless, fragile, chaotic little things, could teach the galaxy anything about violence. Calder's calm clicked softly. "Talon for inbound. T-3. Another explosion cracked in the distance, a low thunder that made the platform tremble. Neither Lynn nor Calder reacted. Then the sound of coughing. A weak, rasping exhale. Lynn turned sharply and strode across the debris-strewn floor to where a wounded figure lay beneath a fallen pillar of synstone. The Kthel ambassador, Yervok, blinked up at her with both his ocular stalks twitching erratically. The creature's gills pulsed erratically, coated in soot. Green blood pooled beneath his segmented armor. "You betrayed us," he rasped, voice a clicking series of modulated tones. "No," Lynn said, crouching beside him. "We adapted. You betrayed the principles you claimed to uphold." Yervok hissed. You played prey. You pretended." "Yes," she replied softly, brushing a hand over the creature's injuries. "We did." There was no pride in her tone, no malice, just a quiet, unyielding truth. She didn't need to explain humanity's history. The Kthel, like the others, had reviewed the records. They'd seen the old wars, the atrocities, the resilience. They'd assumed those were ancient things, buried beneath layers of civility and bureaucracy. They thought Earth had grown docile under the weight of treaties. They didn't understand that civilization was a mask, and humans had learned to wear it well. A thunderous whine roared overhead as a sleek black ship angled downward, VTOL thrusters burning hot as it dropped into the landing zone just beyond the shattered courtyard. Marines fanned out from the ramp before it fully touched down, rifles sweeping the area. One of them, Captain Reyes, gave a sharp nod. "Evac now. We're on the clock." Lynn stood. "Bring him," she said, gesturing to Yervok. Calder hesitated. "Ma'am, with respect. He's alive, and a witness." He goes. The Marines obeyed. Lynn walked briskly through the dust-choked air toward the evac ship, her silhouette framed by the glowing wreckage behind her. As she reached the ramp, she paused and looked up at the stars again. They would come, the rest of the Concorde. Not just ships this time, but declarations, condemnations. The attack on the compound would be spun as a necessary purge, the humans labeled as aggressors. The footage would be doctored, the testimonies silenced. And still, none of it would matter, because the galaxy had shown its hand, and Earth had shown its teeth. Inside the transport, Lynn sat heavily into a crash chair. Calder joined her, setting his rifle against his leg. "This doesn't end here," he said. "No," Lynn replied. "This is where it starts." She leaned her head back against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. For a moment, the vibrations of the engines drowned out everything. Her thoughts, the pain in her side, the weight of 17 names carved into her memory. But beneath it all was a fire, a slow-burning fury that had been kindling for years. The Concorde had declared war without saying the words. They'd expected a whimper in return, a diplomatic objection, maybe some sanctions. They didn't think Earth would send fire. They certainly hadn't expected the fire to be surgical, coordinated, relentless. Lynn didn't need to read the data feeds to know what was already happening. Across half a dozen sectors, Earth's allied colonies would be going dark, not from defeat, but from preparation, blackout protocols, mobilization, war rooms activating command subnets, covert fleets blinking out of known space. She opened her eyes and met Calder's stare. "They think this is going to scare us," she said. He tilted his head. "Won't it? Fear and retreat aren't the same thing. And we don't run." "Not anymore," he agreed. The hum of the ship deepened as it punched into subatmosphere. Beyond the reinforced windows, a kaleidoscope of color fractured the sky as the ship pierced a veil of space. Lynn watched the planet shrink, her reflection superimposed over the dying fires below. She remembered the first time she'd stood before the galactic Concorde, fresh-faced, idealistic, reciting principles of unity and shared progress. They had smiled, some with amusement, others with pity. Only a few had looked uneasy. Only a few had truly understood what humans were. But understanding was not the same as believing. The diplomatic mask had been an effective one. It had allowed her to observe, to study, to learn every weak point, every blind spot in the interstellar bureaucracy. They hadn't lied. Not really. They were diplomats. But they were diplomats the same way a jaguar in tall grass is just a shadow, until it isn't. A calm ping interrupted her thoughts. "Transmission from High Command," Reyes said. "Priority Black Flag." Calder tensed. Lynn stood slowly. "Routed here," she said. The holographic display activated. A familiar face emerged. General Sato, commander of Earth's Deep Operations Initiative. His expression was grim, eyes shadowed by the flickering projection. "Ambassador Marrow," he said, "the Concorde has officially declared your presence a rogue military element. They've denied all accusations of initiating hostilities. We're initiating Protocol Revenant. You are to liaise with Delta teams and proceed to Site Harrow. Confirm, Lynn felt the temperature in the cabin drop. Protocol revenant. The last resort contingency. Designed for the day diplomacy failed, and humanity stopped pretending. Confirmed, she said. The image flickered. And Lynn, she looked up. Make them understand. The signal cut. Silence reigned for a beat. Then Calder exhaled. Guess the mask's off now. No, Lynn said, her voice steady. The mask was never for them. He frowned. Then who? She looked him in the eyes. Ourselves. The ship jumped, space folding around it in a cascade of white light. And as the stars bent to make way for Earth's response, Lynn Marrow closed her eyes one final time. Not in surrender, but in remembrance of who they were, of who they had tried to be, and what they would now have to become. Smoke hung low over the battered ruins of Outpost Kappa 7, curling between shattered bulkheads and twisted plating. The charred scent of burned metal and flesh still clung to the air like a funeral shroud. Kieran's boots crunched over broken glass as he led the squad deeper into the belly of the abandoned station, his rifle raised and every sense stretched taut. They moved like ghosts, silent, watchful, grim. Still no movement on scanners, Ramirez whispered, trailing behind him. Too quiet. Kieran didn't answer. His eyes darted over the darkness. The silence wasn't right. After a slaughter like this, there should have been power flickers, data logs, something. But it was clean, surgical. Everything of value gone. Everyone of value dead. He paused by a collapsed wall and swept the room with his rifle's mounted light. A small figure lay hunched beneath a desk. What remained a child, no more than 6 or 7. She had been clutching a doll. The stuffing had burst. Her throat was slit. Ramirez turned away. Farrell muttered a prayer under her breath. They'd seen death before. Plenty, but this wasn't war. This was artless butchery. The Outer Rim League's not capable of this, Farrell finally said, voice hollow. They don't operate with this kind of precision. This feels off. It's not the League, Kieran murmured. They all looked at him. He stared down at the child, knuckles whitening on his rifle. It's not pirates, insurgents, or any criminal syndicate. This was clean, methodical. No evidence. No witnesses. You think it was them? Ramirez asked. The same ones who hit Deadless Station? Kieran gave a sharp nod. The room felt colder now. The Oblivion Protocol. A name not spoken often, even in Black Ops circles. A phantom group whispered about in intercepted transmissions, and found only in the corpses they left behind. Some said they weren't real. Others said they weren't human. Farrell crouched beside the desk and collected the shattered remains of the doll, folding the child's fingers around it. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Kieran touched his comm. This is Valkyrie's squad. Kappa 7 is a ghost town. No survivors. No usable intel. Requesting immediate evac and fire cleansing. Static buzz for a moment before command replied. Copy that, Valkyrie. We'll prep orbital sweep. Proceed to extraction point Gamma and await pickup. They turned back, retracing their steps in grim silence. But just as they neared the corridor junction leading toward Gamma, Kieran raised a hand. Halt. A faint, rhythmic tapping echoed from beyond the corner. He signaled the team into formation, sweeping low and quick, hugging the corridor wall. Another tap, then a child's giggle. Ramirez flinched. What the hell? Farrell checked her scanner. Nothing showing up. Dead space. Kieran stepped around the corner, rifle up. The hallway beyond was empty. A single ball rolled toward him from the shadows and bumped his boot. Red. Faded. Children's toy. He picked it up slowly. Then the lights cut out. Screams erupted. Not from his team, but somewhere else. Echoing. Twisted. Layers of agonized sound mashed together like a choir of pain. Kieran dropped the ball and hit his night vision. The hallway was still empty, but the temperature had plunged. Pharaoh's voice came through the comms, tight and fast. We've got movement, non-organic, scrambling frequencies. A shadow moved in the periphery of his vision. Then another. Backtrack to junction, he snapped. Eyes up, full sweep. They regrouped at the corridor intersection, forming a defensive perimeter. The air seemed to shudder with static. A whispering grew louder, though none of them could pinpoint its source. Kieran adjusted the scope, eyes narrowing. Then he saw it, just for a second. A shape at the end of the hall, tall, faceless, clothed in segmented armor that shimmered like liquid glass. Its limbs were wrong, too long, joints bent backwards. And then it vanished. Ramirez caught it too. What in God's name was that? Before Kieran could answer, their helmets flared with a high-pitched shriek. All five of them dropped to a knee, clutching their heads. He ripped his helmet off and staggered backward. His ears bled. When he looked up again, a trail of fresh blood was smeared across the corridor wall. Words written in it. You are not welcome here. Pharaoh screamed. One of their squad mates, Mendoza, was gone. No gunfire. No sound. Just a smear of black ash where he'd stood. Kieran swallowed the rising bile in his throat. Fall back. Now. They sprinted for the maintenance shaft access, a shortcut to extraction. As they ran, the whispering grew louder, gibbering, shifting between voices. Sometimes Mendoza's, sometimes the child's, sometimes Kieran's own voice repeating orders he hadn't given. They reached the shaft and sealed the door behind them. The lights here still flickered, but the air felt stable. Clean. Kieran forced himself to breathe. Pharaoh knelt, hands trembling. What the hell was that? I don't know, he admitted, but it's not over. From above, a heavy clang echoed through the shaft. They froze. Another clang, closer this time. Kieran activated the emergency lock. Ramirez muttered, This is no hit squad. This is something else. Something ancient. The hatch above them buckled, just slightly, and then silence. No more whispering. No more clangs. They waited. Long minutes passed. Kieran finally exhaled and keyed his comm. This is Valkyrie to command. We've encountered an unknown hostile force. Mendoza is Kia. Request reroute of evac to Vector Echo 7. Command came back with confusion. Say again? We have you tagged near Gamma. Who's Mendoza? Kieran blinked. What are you talking about? He's our comm specialist. Your manifest shows 4 squad members. No one named Mendoza. He stared at the others. Ramirez was pale. Pharaoh's lips were moving silently. We were 5, she whispered. Weren't we? Kieran looked down at the ash on his gloves. It was gone. There was no blood in the corridor. No message on the walls. No sign of the doll. As if it had never happened. He didn't reply to command. He just said, We're moving to Echo 7. Be ready. Their transport arrived 30 minutes later. A gunship loaded with reinforced Marines and Class V autocannons. The kind of firepower reserved for battlefield hell zones. Command wasn't taking chances. Kieran didn't explain what happened. He didn't know how. Back aboard the carrier Mistral, he sat alone in the debriefing chamber, staring at the recording data from his helmet. Frame by frame, there was nothing. No blood, no whispers, no entity, no child, no Mendoza. The system reported a clean sweep of Outpost Kappa 7. Radiation spikes, some structural collapse, no survivors. No proof of what they saw. Pharaoh hadn't spoken since they returned. Ramirez was being sedated for night terrors. Command had questions. Dozens. Kieran gave them nothing. He had one lead, buried in corrupted logs from his suit. A single line embedded in the metadata. No pattern. Echo void. He locked it behind triple encryption and started planning. Because whatever had found them out, there wasn't finished. And neither was he. The rain on Helio Station was artificial, programmed to fall in soft, rhythmic pulses. But tonight it drummed hard against the domed transparent steel, as though the sky itself had grown restless. Kieran watched it in silence on the edge of the observation deck, arms crossed, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and something deeper, purpose reborn. Behind him, boots clicked once across the metal floor. He didn't turn. "You brought us ghosts," said Commander Hark. Her voice was low, emotionless, the kind of calm that came after too many funerals. "They weren't ghosts," Kieran said. "They were something worse." She joined him at the window, hands folded behind her back. Her uniform was spotless, her face unreadable. "You're still claiming Mendoza existed." He did. I can remember the sound of his laugh, his handwriting, how he called Ramirez babyface, whenever she whined about rations. He existed. No records, no body, no logs. "That's what makes it worse," Kieran said, his voice tight. "They didn't kill him. They erased him." Hark exhaled, not in dismissal, but in a slow release of tension. "We analyze your logs. Every frame, every trace. The no pattern phrase you flagged. It's old. Very old. Predates human spaceflight by centuries. Shows up in decoded transmissions across dead zones. Always the same signature. Disappearance, false memories, zero trace. So they've done this before." "More times than we can count," Hark replied. "Most of the black sites that vanished over the last decade, they all had that same signal embedded in corrupted metadata. Someone's been watching, waiting." Kieran finally turned to her. "I want authorization for a kill recon strike. I found a signature match 6 hours ago. Orbital perimeter near Theta 19. Same null pattern. Same scrub logs. This time we going fast. No survey team. Just fire and steel." She studied him. "You're compromised, Lieutenant. I'm aware. You're unstable. Maybe. And I'd rather have unstable truth than calm denial," she said, stepping away. "You have clearance, but you take someone else. This doesn't go unchecked again." Kieran nodded once. "I'll take Pharaoh." She hasn't spoken in 2 days. She doesn't need to. She remembers him too. Pharaoh met him at the hangar, without speaking. Her eyes were hollow but focused, a rifle strapped across her back, gear packed, jaw clenched tight. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. They launched aboard a Black Ops drop shuttle, crewed only by an AI pilot and sealed under Level Z clearance. The interior was dark, lit only by the red glow of status panels and shifting telemetry on the walls. Kieran strapped him beside her. "Why, Theta 19? She asked. I dug through the archives. 10 years ago, a research outpost there went dark. Same MO civilian scientists. No military presence. Everything erased. Orbital scans show the structure still exists. Untouched, no power signature, no life." Pharaoh stared ahead. "And now it pings the null pattern. Same fingerprint, same voice in the dark." They didn't speak again for the remainder of the descent. Theta 19 was a frozen world of jagged cliffs and ash-colored snow. The atmosphere was breathable but thin, biting at exposed skin and numbing the tips of fingers through even insulated gloves. The shuttle touched down silently 2 clicks from the abandoned outpost. Kieran and Pharaoh advanced on foot, cloaked beneath active camouflage that bent light and heat. They moved as shadows across the bleak ice, twin hunters seeking phantoms. The structure loomed ahead, circular, sunken halfway into the ice. Half a dome of matte alloy, blackened by age. No lights, no defense systems, no movement, just silence. They breached the outer airlock manually, cutting through half-frozen security panels. The interior stank of mold, copper, and something more primal, decay made manifest in scent. Their HUDs lit up with temperature shifts, strange fluxes in gravity, mild EM interference. Just like Kappa 7. Kieran swept the corridor ahead. Sweep, log, extract. We don't linger. Pharaoh only nodded. They moved room by room. The labs were frozen mid-movement. Papers scattered, chairs toppled, equipment mid-calibration. It was as though everyone had stood up at once and simply ceased to exist. But no bodies, no blood, just absence. In the central hub, they found it. A single terminal still powered. Its screen glowed dimly, but the data within was corrupted, lines of text blinking in languages neither of them recognized. And between the symbols, fragments of video footage. Pharaoh activated one. A scientist, wide-eyed, panting. He held the camera too close. Behind him, alarms flared. "They're inside the station," he whispered. "They don't come through doors. They fold, like paper. They bend light and memory. They're not just here to kill. They're static, then screaming." Pharaoh stared at the screen. "They've been testing us." Kieran nodded slowly, seeing how far they can push before we break. Suddenly the air shifted. A low-frequency hum vibrated through the walls. The lights dimmed to nothing. Their suit sensors spiked. Gravitational inversion, atmospheric compression. Then came the sound. Not whispering, not screaming. A low, wet dragging sound. Pharaoh drew a rifle, body tensed. Scanning. "We need to get out. Now." Kieran tapped his comms. "Miss Strahl, this is Valkyrie. Initiate emergency extract. Coordinates marked. Repeat, emergency evac required." The comms cut to static. The dragging grew louder. Kieran motioned. They sprinted for the exit. Halfway down the corridor, the shadows twisted. Something unfurled from the ceiling. Limbs made of segmented black mass. Shifting like smoke, but moving with intent. No eyes. No face. Just impossible anatomy and hunger. It lunged. Pharaoh opened fire. No scream, no panic. Her round slammed into the thing's torso, but it barely slowed. Kieran dropped low, unloaded a concussive charge, the blast echoing off the corridor walls and throwing the entity backward. They ran again. A door slammed shut behind them. Lock override failed. Kieran growled, forced an emergency bypass. Another shadow moved across the glass wall beside them. This time it smiled, not with a mouth, but with shape, mimicking Pharaoh's own reflection, then twisting inside out, her face in agony, her eyes blank. Pharaoh stopped cold. "It's showing me." "Don't look," Kieran snapped, dragging her forward. They made it to the outer chamber. Another terminal flickered. On instinct, Kieran slammed a data spike into the port. A file opened. Not video. Not text. A list. Names. Thousands of them. Each one marked with a symbol beside it. Pharaoh's breath caught. "These are us. People. From Earth. Every colony. Marked. For what?" The answer came in the next file. A map, not of worlds. Of influence. Regions infected by the null pattern. Entire star systems now silent, erased from galactic memory. No warnings. No wars. Just clean disappearance. "We're not fighting a force," Kieran whispered. "We're inside a system. One designed to erase resistance. To rewrite reality." The shadows returned. This time they didn't run. Kieran pulled a plasma grenade from his belt and armed it, throwing Pharaoh toward the exit. "Go. Get the data out." If they catch us again, no one remembers. No one fights. Pharaoh struggled, shaking her head. No, not again. You die and they'll make me forget you. He shoved the spike into her hand. Then remember this. He turned, faced the advancing entities, and smiled like a man who'd already accepted his end. Pharaoh staggered into the snow, the shuttle's emergency beacon flaring to life. She hit the evac signal just as the dome behind her exploded. Brilliant blue fire lighting the frozen cliffs. The shadows didn't follow. Not this time. As the shuttle ascended, Pharaoh clutched the spike to her chest. The names were still there. Kieran's was the last one, but no mark beside it. Not erased. Remembered. The Galactic Council convened beneath the vaulted crystal dome of Arx Ultima, far above the molten clouds of myrrh. Delegates from 100 species murmured in low tones as a human woman, so slight among giants, stepped alone into the center ring. The chamber quieted not from respect, but from wariness. She was not invited. Pharaoh stood unflinching, wrapped in the char-black coat of a reconnaissance operative. Dust still clung to the fabric. One of her sleeves was scorched through. She hadn't slept in 72 hours. High Speaker Trath of the Silver Collective clicked his jaw mandibles once. You're not authorized to address this body, Terran. She tossed the data spike at his feet. Then don't call an address. Call it a warning. Trath's aide retrieved the spike. A moment passed as data flooded the Council's central display. Maps, names, screaming coordinates, no pattern identifiers. A wave of silence swept the chamber like a cold breath. One of the Vakir delegates leaned forward, feathers ruffled. These designations were lost cycles ago. We presume collapse, not interference. Pharaoh's voice cut through the cold. You presumed wrong. These were erased. Entire worlds. Not conquered. Not destroyed. Forgotten, even by your own records. A flicker of unease moved through the chamber. Trath narrowed his four eyes. Evidence can be manufactured, and your species is known for emotional irrationality. Pharaoh stepped closer, past the boundary field. Security drones buzzed, but she ignored them. Then explained why footage of Kappa 7's fall. Personnel wiped from existence mid-sentence. Explained the null pattern resonance infecting sectors light years apart. Explain how your council failed to notice that nearly 1/7 of map space has gone quiet. She paused, letting the words settle like ash on silk. You didn't fail to notice. You chose not to see. An oathen ambassador stirred. You are suggesting a coordinated force? Something that can bend matter, memory, perception? I'm not suggesting it. Pharaoh's voice dipped into something deeper. I watched them tear a man out of time. His name was Kieran. He saved what little we could salvage. And I remember him because I refuse to forget. Trath exhaled slowly. Even if we entertain this theory, what do you propose? We don't wage war against ghosts. Pharaoh's hand clenched at her side. No, but humans? We do. 48 hours later, Pharaoh stood at the edge of Sol's military command chamber, orbiting Mars. The war room had changed. Once a museum of outdated steel and analog schematics, it now bristled with living code and evolving models. The old guard had been replaced by survivors, those who'd lost people to the black silence, and those who remembered. Pharaoh approached the table. Project Osiris burned across its center, a neural map linking hundreds of human outposts and defense networks. Some were marked green, others yellow, but far too many now bled red. The Admiral looked up. Gwen, the last of the Danang line, and the only one Pharaoh trusted with what was coming. You briefed the council, he said. They listened, but they won't fight, not until it reaches their inner systems. They always wait until it's too late. I told them we won't. Gwen nodded. Then it starts with us. The first mission was code-named Reckoner. 6 operatives. Black Ops. No return window. Pharaoh volunteered before the sentence finished. The shuttle was dark, stripped of AI support. No electronics beyond suit interfaces and field emitter rifles. No pattern entities corrupted higher logic systems. It had to be analog. It had to be personal. Her team was silent. Cade, the demolitions expert who'd watched his sister disappear mid-sentence on a colony call. Victor, a pilot with no remaining flights left in his log, because his base had been scrubbed from planetary record. Callie, ex-council assassin, defected after a target vanished the moment she pulled the trigger. And Hobbs and Lynn, twins who no longer remembered which one had been born first, because the thing had blurred their minds the night it came for their family. Each of them carried fragments of memory, like jagged glass in their minds. Each of them knew this was no longer a fight for territory. This was a fight to prove they'd existed. The insertion point was a moon called Ixon 4, just past the Caravel Drift, a former mining colony turned ghost shell. It had pinged with no resonance thrice in the past month, enough to make it bait. They touched down at local dusk. No wind, no movement. The air was stale, as if time itself held its breath. Pharaoh led point. The streets were still marked with boot prints. Human, recent, but no people, no sounds. Even their own voices were swallowed too quickly by the air, as though the world resented remembering. Cade muttered. Anyone else feel like this place forgot how to echo? Pharaoh signaled silence. Ahead, the old refinery shimmered, not with light, but wrongness, like watching heat through glass, only nothing was hot. The door stood open. Inside, they found the first signal flare. A human arm, still twitching. No body. Lynn checked her scanner. No vital signs. But the muscles still active. Signal interference is delaying shutdown. Not interference, said Callie. Distortion, like the body's confused about whether it exists. Then the humming began. Not sound, but pressure blooming in their chests. Victor swore. We're not alone. The shadows unfurled again. This time, the team stood firm. Pharaoh activated the null field emitter, a field of synchronized memory anchors designed by human neuroscientists. It wasn't a shield. It was a reminder, a projection of selfhood. As long as it held, they couldn't be forgotten. The shadows recoiled. Callie opened fire, not at center mass. That didn't work. You had to aim for the fractures, the seams in their borrowed shape. Cade deployed charges. Pulse disruptors crafted from stolen council tech, mixed with Terran chaos. Improvised, brutal, effective. They fought like cornered beasts. Because they were. The air screamed. Not sound. Reality screamed. The null entities tried to fold through space, but the emitters scrambled their transitions. Several flickered, lost form, dissolved in reverse, like film melting backward. And then one spoke, not with a voice, but through Pharaoh's own thoughts. You cannot win. She gritted her teeth. We're not trying to win. You are delaying deletion. No, she said, raising her rifle. We're documenting your failure. The final shot cracked the dome. Light, pure, blinding, erupted as the last creature vanished. Silence, not hollow, but peaceful. The mission had lasted 17 minutes. The effect was permanent. Ixon, for it joined the star maps. People began to remember. Names returned to databases. Images restored. Colonial logs blinked back to life. The null pattern hadn't expected resistance not fueled by fear or conquest, but memory, will, defiance. Back on Mars, Gwen watched as 1,000 red dots flickered to yellow. Hope. Pharaoh stood at the memorial wall outside the war room. Kieran's name now etched in steel. She traced it with her fingers. Below it, new names appeared, operatives from Reckoner, witnesses, fighters, survivors. They'd told the galaxy what was coming, and they'd done more. They'd reminded the darkness that humanity remembers its dead and never forgives the erasure of its own.